protest didn't happen, will take its place.
How I
Yeah.
was stated it.
So, coming here with an 830G application,
My son got it.
I mean, it's-
all we get is more than 240 units.
Does
But I wasn't.
are the selectmen looking at their agreement?
So we're good to go?
You're good to go. We're on. Live. There's a member X.
Okay, the meeting will now come to order. We'll begin with introduction of members and seating of alternates. And we'll begin introducing town staff. So here we have Dawn and Dan,
Dan Beret, town planner.
and nobody else from town, right? Town staff? Okay. For commission members, we'll do introductions starting on my left.
Tom Bransfield?
Bob Ellsworth.
Chantel Foster.
Carolyn Freeman.
Robert Taylor.
Tom, could I ask you to be seated for Victoria, please?
Certainly.
Okay. Thank you. Next item would be to accept the agenda. May I have a motion to accept the agenda as presented?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the agenda is accepted as presented. So first order of business is public hearing, and the first item is a continuation of application 21-12, which are amendments to the Town of Portland zoning regulations. And this is continued from the July 14th meeting. So we have received the proposed text amendments. I hope everyone has read them. Would anybody like to make any comments, discuss? Either commission members or members of the public?
I just want to note that the diagram or picture that we had received and was not attached to this, and it's referenced. It's illustration of front yard area that requires a lower fence height. I think
Okay.
that it was not attached to the latest, the August 4th, 22nd.
Yeah, it appears to be an oversight not sending that out to you guys, but certainly that would be included as part of the approval.
Okay. Thanks, Dan. Carolyn? Anybody else have questions or comments? Members of the public? Oh, Rose? Sure. If you would, please introduce yourself.
Rosaletta. I'd just like to ask the commission to vote on the text changes tonight and pass it through. And we've been working on them for quite a long time, put a lot of work into it, and I'd just like to see it passed tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Rose. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, then may I have a motion to close the public hearing, please?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Okay, that was Robert, I guess. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Say no. Okay, the public hearing for application 21-12 is now closed. Any further comments or questions by commission members?
No, I went through and I think all the stuff that we had talked about was captured here. There may be some issues with tying back to certain definitions, but I think those will come through as they do. But I think that the changes, especially to the lot lines and corner lots and things, I think that's all.
Right, that was the most complicated one by far. Yep, I agree, I did the same thing. Anyone else? Okay then, I believe we have two separate motions, one for each regulation. let's see, who would like to read the first one? Chantel, could I ask you to read the first one?
To approve application 2112 amendment to the Town of Portland zoning regulations, Article 2 definitions to delete error and, oh no, that's here. Is this the first one or is this the second one?
It's a second.
Did you want me to read the second one or the first one?
Yeah, I guess it doesn't matter, Chantel.
Okay,
Lot lines?
well, I'm reading the one on,
Lot lines?
no, I'm reading the
Okay.
one on pet grooming.
Okay.
To delete error in definition of barrel and provide definition of domestic pet grooming, table 4.1, permitted uses residential zones, to allow domestic pet grooming by site plan in all residential areas and allow as of right roadside stands selling agricultural products produced on site in all residential areas. Table 5.1, permitted uses business zones, to clarify pet grooming standards. Article 9, special regulations to define detached accessory apartments and clarify standards for visits for home occupations. And Article 10, zone change, special permit and site plan standards and procedures to correct a scrivener's error by removing plot from, in quotes, one set of the plot plans which, end quote, with changes and/or clarifications to the proposed text amendments as follows. I don't.
Yeah, I don't think you have to read the whole
Okay.
thing, just the underlined part, I
Okay.
believe. Okay, may I have a second to the motion, please?
Second.
Okay, this is Bob, I vote aye. Tom?
Aye.
Chantel?
Aye.
Carolyn?
Aye.
Robert?
Aye.
Any opposed? There would be none. Okay, the motion is approved. And then Carolyn, could I ask you to read the second one, lot lines?
Who seconded this?
I think Robert.
Do I just read what's in red? I mean this and then what's in red?
I would say just the underlined
Just
part.
that. To approve application 2112 amendments to the Town of Portland zoning regulations, Article 2 definitions to amend lot line, front lot line, side yard, front and yard, side. Article 3 general requirements, table 3.1.2.8 shed setbacks, and section 3.1.2C, section 3.6 corner lots and visibility, section 3.7 lot line designation, corner and triangular lots, section 3.10 interior lots, Article 4 residential zones, table 4.1 permitted uses residential areas, notes to table 4.1 permitted uses residential zones, Article 5 business zones, section 5.3 special requirements, B1 designated business zones, section 5.3.2.1 site plan standards, Article 9 special regulations, section 9.15.1 walls and fences, residential zones, section 9.15.2 walls and fences, business zones, application of the Portland Planning and Zoning Commission, with changes and/or clarifications to the proposed text amendment as follows.
Okay, may I have a second to the motion, please?
Second.
Okay, that was Robert, seconded it. This is Bob, I vote aye. Tom?
Aye.
Chantel?
Aye.
Carolyn?
Aye.
Robert?
Aye.
Opposed? There would be none. Okay, the motion is approved. That's it, right, for that one?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next item of business is a public hearing for application 21-18, proposed amendment to section 9 of the Town of Portland zoning regulations to add a new section 9.18 under special regulations for a cannabis moratorium. May I have a motion to open the public hearing, please?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Okay, it was Tom. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, public hearing for application 21-18 is now open. I'd just like to start and say that the commission has been discussing these regulations for a period of time, and for a couple of different reasons, we've decided that it would be in our best interest to put a temporary moratorium in place so that we have some additional time to iron out the regulations which would best serve the town. So that's my spiel for this. Is there anyone who would like to speak to this application?
So I'm against the moratorium,
Okay.
because, well, to start, any marijuana cannabis application that has to either go through a special permit or receive affirmative approval from the town. And that means it has to go through us, and we have to vote on it anyways. So this just seems like it's a knee-jerk reaction to changes that don't really change our authority or ability to regulate any cannabis establishment that comes into this town before we set up any local rules for it. On top of that, the language we have in the proposed moratorium is overly broad and could potentially impact the licenses that will, the permits we've already approved. And for that, I don't think that this is a good idea. And I would recommend we don't go in favor of this.
Rob, can I ask a question of Rob?
Please.
How would it potentially impact something that we've already approved?
So the new cannabis establishments portion, I think it's line 3 or section 9.18A3, where it says applicability, and it just says new cannabis establishments shall be prohibited in the town of Portland. So, I mean, technically, the plan that we've already approved hasn't been established yet, because they haven't been licensed by the Department of Consumer Protection. It's broad enough to be problematic, where the Department of Consumer Protection could look at that and say, we put a hold on anything from going on in the town of Portland related to cannabis.
Even those that we already reviewed.
So Rob, if I could just interject on one point. So new cannabis establishments would be new applications. So the application that was approved by you guys at 78 Marlboro, that was filed. So that we would not consider that in the land use office to be a new application.
Okay.
So that application would not be affected. There is also an approval for a facility at 47 Lower Main Street. We did receive, I believe, I gave that to you, an email from an owner of that facility who's looking to start that back up. I was going to discuss with you potentially how that wasn't going to be affected by this, whether it was to simply, with your understanding, consider that an existing business, and that would not be classified as a new cannabis establishment or just or grow. So that would not be affected, or we could even, as was one of the concerns, because it's no longer necessarily grown for medical marijuana, strike the medical portion out of the exception and statement of purpose in one. I'm not sure if that alleviates some of your concerns.
Not really, because we now have to make an exception to a rule that we're making, and it just seems like it's just more work. When we're already halfway through a lot of the editing that we've already started working on earlier this year, and it just seems like, since we already do have to go through an approval process as required by the statutes, then it seems like this is just we're delaying something that we don't necessarily need to delay.
Other thoughts by commission members?
Well, I think the concern was that we could potentially receive, 3 or 4 of these applications and then have to consider them without any real guidelines.
We still can say yes or no to any applicant that comes through, because the statutes require us to either have a special permit for it or affirmative approval, which means they have to come to us, we have to vote on it. And if we decide that we've got one too many applications pending or potential businesses coming into the town, we can say no to it.
And that would be a valid reason to say no?
I don't see why it wouldn't be.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that
Is
was
that
my,
a-
that was
is
my
that a
thought
valid
too.
reason?
Can we say no
Yeah.
without any real
A
back?
lot of the control gets brought down to the town itself and how we want to handle it. And I don't think anybody would ever say that we were wrong about saying we already have 3 applications. Why are we going to get another business in there until we wait to see what happens with those applicants with their licenses? It just, I don't know, I would rather see us put more energy and effort into making the ordinances for the cannabis establishments and getting those pumped out, rather than putting a moratorium on it and then just delaying it out. We still have to work on it, we still have to pick up where we started on it.
Right,
Why
but
not
then
just do
we,
that?
but it would kind of give, I mean, this is a 6-month moratorium. I mean, it's not a, you know, it's not going to go on forever. It just would give us a little breathing room to get the other stuff done. That's, I think that was the intent of this. Not to say we're going to have a moratorium, we're not going to have any more.
No, I know that. I know that the intent is to give us more time, but I don't think we need more time.
Excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt your debate. Could you guys speak up into the microphones?
Oh,
I'm
can't
getting,
hear you
I'm getting
on-
told from,
Okay, so speak up to the microphone.
maybe push them a little closer to you if need be.
All right, well, what are we going to do?
Okay.
So Rob, are you saying we kind of put together some, or
Still
started
can't
to
hear.
put together some regulations, and you're saying?
Carolyn, could you speak up? Sorry,
Okay.
Tom can't
So,
hear you.
Rob, are you saying that you want us to just continue looking at the regulations that we started to put together and go, like, complete that? But in the meantime, we could receive additional applications, but they have to be approved by the state prior to coming to the town?
No.
So
That's what
the
I'm,
Connecticut statutes just require us to have some type of approval that is like more than just them handing in an application and just gets rubber stamped. So they have to come to us and we have to vote to approve it, or we have a special permit, which then we still have to vote to approve anyways. So we're still in control of it, of whether or not we want to have multiple businesses or not. So it's just I would rather we just put our effort into getting the ordinances and like our regulations put together and start putting them on the agenda rather than waiting. I don't see our town having a flood of applications coming in.
But it could happen, that's the thing.
I mean, a lot of things could happen,
Yeah.
but it doesn't mean they will.
Right, but I mean, this only puts it on hold for 6 months, so, I mean, I don't know, I kind of think of it as a little safety net, you know?
I see it as an unnecessary safety net.
Okay. Anyone in the public like to speak on behalf of this application? Yes, sir. If you would approach the podium, introduce yourself, please, name and address.
Hi, my name is Tom McLaren. I'm a new resident here of this town. My wife and I just moved here in November to 9 Perry Avenue. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, on this, unless I'm mistaken, we've been housing until recently a grow house down below the bridge of medical marijuana. So marijuana is not new to this town. We accepted those tax dollars and we accepted that business down there. So why are we not going to allow it to be sold in town?
We have already approved a retail sale marijuana facility.
So what's okay? So what's the more? I completely agree with everything he just said. As he just said, you guys are in complete control whether you want 1 or 25. It doesn't matter. You guys are in complete control of the special permit. So what is the point of the moratorium? Is I think what he's trying to get across.
When we approved the one application, the state regulations, as we understood them at the time, would have limited Portland to one facility. There was a I believe it was 25,000
Yep.
population limit
Okay.
per facility. That has changed since the end of the legislative session.
So has the ability of the town's right to regulate the amount of cannabis businesses coming into the town changed?
So if I could just make one point for the board. I wouldn't recommend taking an application and making a denial based on you don't think there should be that many establishments in town. it's, you know, it's a retail store. It's like a gas station. If a gas station
like a
wanted.
liquor store,
Yeah,
like a lot
right.
of things that we've established the right to business in this
Right, so
town.
I'm just trying to give the board some information here.
Okay.
If you receive 4 applications, you can't start denying these applications because you feel there are too many of these establishments coming into town, the way the regulations are currently structured. So I just want to, you do have wide latitude in your authority, in your legislative authority to approve applications for conditions.
So-
I would not recommend you using a denial based on the fact that you think there are too many cannabis retail establishments.
With that 6-month moratorium, are there any ideas of what those regulations that this board would be enacting of? Or are we just asking for 6 months to come up with ideas?
When we approved 78 Marlboro Street, our town attorney also made several comments regarding our proposed regulations that we were working on at the time. So I think, my thinking is that is one of the reasons we would be asking for some additional time to refine the regulations that we had been working on.
Are those regulations available or posted? That's what are the regulations that we're trying to buy this time to enact?
Well, they're a work in progress,
Okay.
so I don't believe they would be available to the
Do we have an objective of what the end goal is to achieve with the regulations?
Well, as an example of some of the ideas is restricting such a facility in the area of schools, churches,
Okay.
similar, I believe similar to what we have for liquor stores.
Okay.
So,
So,
those are some of the ideas.
so the general end goal might to be perceived to be achieved towards the same regulations as liquor stores.
Well, we've tossed that idea back and forth, you know. But there was also some comments regarding proximity to rental apartments or other residences, so.
Okay.
Yeah, just to let you know, and I'm coming in on the tail end of this, I was not here for the majority of the discussions regarding this. All of the minutes and agendas are posted online.
Okay.
And those would kind of give you a
Yeah,
feeling as to the discussion.
This is my first time meeting, so I'm just here introducing myself, asking some questions, and saying hello, so.
Yeah, no, yeah, but yeah, so yeah, all their discussions are available for you to take a look at.
Okay, awesome.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Someone else from the public? Yes, sir.
Good evening. Reno Ferrisi, 47 Main Street.
Would you like the name spelled, Dawn?
Reno, R-I-N-O. Ferrisi, F as in Frank, E-R-R-A-R-E-S-E.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I sent the email in on behalf of the establishment at 47 Main Street. My intention was to get clarification that that location is outside of the limits of the moratorium, and that facility continue to be recognized as a cannabis establishment. May I read the email that I wrote for everyone in attendance? Thank you.
Yes. Mhm.
Dear Planning and Zoning Commissioners and Development Planner, please accept this letter as a request for exemption from the proposed temporary and limited moratorium on cannabis establishments. We ask that the property at 47 Main Street in Portland can be grandfathered and exempt from the proposed moratorium, as it was previously a licensed medical marijuana producer from 2013 to May 20th, 2022. During that time, there were 45 full-time employees at the location, and the business was supportive of the town with annual donations to fundraisers for emergency services, the Portland Fair, and many other town-related functions. The intention, with town approval, is to reopen the site as a microcultivator business as defined by Connecticut Adult Use Bill SB 1201, aka RERACA. We also have an application on file with the DCP for that license type. Again, just looking for clarification that the moratorium would not impact the establishment at 47 Main.
Okay. My thinking personally was that the moratorium would be for recreational cannabis. establishments. That was my understanding. So, to Rob's point, if our proposed moratorium is excessively broad, then we should tighten it up a little bit.
Okay, so I did speak with John Giskowski. He's the consultant planner that was here and put this text together. There's 2 points I guess we could make. It's my understanding, Reno, that you weren't just strictly growing medical marijuana necessarily anymore.
It would be a microculture corrected grow for both adult use and medical, but there's really no distinction. It's the same packaging. We don't sell from there.
Right, so 2 things. In applicability, it does talk about new cannabis establishments. Now, we in the land use office could interpret that as meaning 47 Main Street is an existing establishment, an existing approval, just like 78 Marlboro Street. So those could continue under their current approvals, if you'd like. Now, in Section 1, Statement of Purpose, it does say producers for medical marijuana. We could strike medical from that, so it's just producers of marijuana who are exempt, and that would then allow, the microcultivator to fall under that exemption. We don't necessarily have to do that if the board agrees that that's an existing establishment, it's not a new establishment, so it wouldn't fall under this moratorium. And the land use office can, administer this moratorium in that fashion. So we could strike both. We could do, we could consider it both, and we could strike medical if that makes you more comfortable. It's really however you would like to handle it.
So,
Well, do you think it would take 6 months for us to get regulations together? I mean,
Well, so you want to, we could shorten the duration of the moratorium,
yeah.
but my recommendation is to give yourself enough time if you'd like to do the moratorium so that you can formulate the regulations and then we can advertise a public hearing and get that passed prior to any more applications coming in if that's what the board desires. So, we could do 3 months, we could do 4 months. I think 3 months would be very tight. But you could shorten the moratorium if you'd like, and we could, get back on the discussions about the regulation changes next meeting. But, it's really up to whatever you think your purview is. It certainly shouldn't be, I wouldn't recommend going much longer than 6 months, but I think 6 months is a reasonable time frame. But we could maybe do it in 4 if you guys wanted to.
right, we could do it sooner.
Well,
Right.
what would happen if we did, look at what we had worked on before, change it the way we wanted it, and then got it ready in, let's say, a couple months? Could we just take this moratorium off? Or not? Or does that-
No, I think it would
that
need
creates another
to,
problem?
I think it would need to last for the duration
Okay.
that you set. The whole idea, though, is if you don't do a moratorium, any applications that come in at this
Right.
point would be under the existing regulations.
Right.
So whatever changes that you have in mind, the public hearing for that application may be after you decide, on changes, but it's the regulations of the time of submission of the application that would be what would be enforced or the guidelines for the applicant for approval.
Well, it's my understanding when we discussed this in regards to the current facilities, it was for any new establishments that were going to come forward.
Yeah.
Anyone we had already approved, we had
Yeah, and that's.
treated them as an established.
And that's an interpretation that
Decision.
me and John are both comfortable with administering in the land use office. We can consider 47 Lower Main Street as well as 78 Marlboro Street as existing establishments, and they can operate under their existing approvals.
The difference being, the intended use for Lower Main Street would be for medical as well as adult use.
So I would have to go back and
Cultivation,
look at the
yeah.
approvals, and I could talk to Carrie
That's where it
Olson
gets
regarding
tricky.
whether that approval would affect, the language of that approval and this moratorium would affect his operation.
Or maybe you just change you just make the change to this, to exclude.
So it would be an
The
existing,
growing.
right, you could strike medical, and it'd be any marijuana application would be exempt, that's already been approved.
That's already been approved.
Right.
Yeah.
If I just may. So it's a matter of a transfer of ownership. There'll be new ownership,
No, no, transfer of ownership doesn't matter, it's just the use of the building, so.
building, so it's, okay.
Yep,
Thank
yep,
you.
Yep, that's fine. And I guess just to give you, just to give you an example, White Dog rebranded itself to Hop Knot. They came back for signage changes for the name because they're in the Town Center Village District, but they did not come back to this board because it's a, restaurant and bar going to a restaurant and bar.
Good, thank you.
Yep.
Makes sense.
My suggestion would be to strike the medical from the proposed moratorium.
And if it would make you more comfortable, I certainly can seek a legal opinion to ensure that. But I think me and John were both fairly comfortable in that covering them. But I think you brought up a good point, Bob. I could read into their approval just to double check that. But,
Yeah.
I mean, if that's the understanding of the board, I'm not looking to enforce something that you guys are comfortable with.
Right.
And so, Rob, what do you think? What are your thoughts since you brought
I'd
this
rather
up?
just work on the ordinances and get those out rather than putting a hold on this and waiting. And I mean, we're already seeing it's causing a complication with an existing application. And then you run into the question of, okay, if we strike out medical use and we permit, then we kind of dictate who he can sell to. Is that what?
No. The concern was originally that was 47 Lower Main Street was approved under the old laws with medical marijuana. So he's not strictly growing medical cannabis anymore. He's just growing cannabis for recreational or medical use. And so I think the only concern was whether his current approval strictly dictates whether he can be a grower of medical marijuana. I'm not sure it would, but I don't want to give the board the false impression. I haven't gone back and read his approval. I was here for the expansion of the facility, but I wasn't here for the original approval, so I'm not familiar with what language was used.
Question. Have you applied with the Department of Consumer Protection for a new license or anything like that, or is it like some continuance of the old one? How's that working for you right now?
There is an application on file with DCP.
Okay. Do you know if the Department of Consumer Protection is requiring you to get new permission for the zoning from the town, or is that something that they're going to take the old permission and reapply it to your new application?
They would require evidence of zoning approval,
Okay. So we'd have to re-vote on your application again.
probably.
So if we put a hold on it, then we're putting a hold on his current application. And if we create an exception, then we're kind of just creating, I guess, just a weird hold. It just doesn't seem like it'd be worth it at that point to create a moratorium when we could just do what we originally wanted to do at the beginning of the year and finish these ordinances and move on.
I'm not sure I followed how it would be holding him up.
Because he would need to get approval from us again to satisfy the needs of the Department of Consumer Protection.
Well,
If we put a hold on that, then we wouldn't be, he wouldn't be able to get that approval from us until May 1st.
But I
Pass it.
thought what we were saying was that he doesn't need to come to us again because that place has already been
Yeah.
approved.
So for our needs, yes. For the Department of Consumer Protections, no.
But I thought I heard him say the state needs evidence of zoning approval.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I would think showing our existing regulations to the state would be adequate.
I don't want to speak for the Department of Consumer Protection. I'm not familiar with their approval process.
So
I
maybe
think, I
we
think
need
that
to.
the thought of the town was that as long as he works within the existing approval that was granted, he would still have zoning approval. And certainly if a document was needed to be signed by the Department of Consumer Protection stating whether he had approval, we could do so.
Do we want to get that checked out by?
I mean, is your main concern too many retail sales? Or is there too many growers? I mean, we could tailor this in a way that would only put a moratorium on retail sales until you guys were comfortable. I mean, that's, I guess, something, I'm just trying to find different avenues for you guys to
Yeah.
consider this.
From what I understand, this moratorium came up because of the passing of a bill that modified the limitations on the number of cannabis establishments that could happen in a municipality, which was, I believe it was one retail and one cultivator for every 25,000 residents of the municipality. So that's kind of what prompted this, because the state kind of just took that away.
Yeah, but I guess in my mind, I don't think you guys are concerned about another cultivator coming in, per se. You may want to, like Bob laid out to the gentleman before from Perry Ave, put some restrictions on where locations of retail sales could be. I haven't been privy to, what you guys, I didn't know that you guys were working on regulations earlier this year. So if you want, we can go back and rework this to be more retail oriented and not impact cultivators' applications. And that would then, take out any potential for holding up 47 Lower Main Street, or any other cultivator that came into town. They would, then just have to meet our current regs. It's really whatever the desire and the determination of the board is.
I don't see a problem with having more than one retailer in this town. I mean, I don't see what the issue would be. Other than the business concerns for the applications we've already approved and adding extra competition for them, I don't see the concern. And I don't also see applications flooding in right now to, grab up real estate in this town. So, I think we have plenty of time to do what we need to do with the ordinances that we've already started on and finish it. I just don't think that, the changes to the statutes is too much to be worried about.
My thinking is, Dan, if we could get clarification on the existing regulations, whether the existing approval is for medical use only, or if recreational use falls under that too.
And then in the meantime, should we schedule something? In the
Something we
meantime,
want to
can
ask
we
her?
schedule something to work on, we should schedule something to work on the regulations.
I mean, one thing I could do, so I can get clarification on the regulation as it regards to the existing approval for cultivation. We could tweak I could have a motion ready with an outline of a motion that would not involve growers' establishments and simply have retail, or you guys can decide to table this matter entirely at the next meeting. So I can have a couple different options prepared for you if that's what you'd like. And we can certainly fill in the blanks on the amount of months if you want to shorten it, to 3 months or 4 months. So, you are more focused on the actual change, and, we can work through that quickly, and so we're not holding people up. All I'm here to do is try to, provide you the information you need to make an informed decision as best as you can. So if you want, I can try to get clarification if it affects him or not. Yeah, I don't want to keep repeating myself, but obviously, try to give you some options at the next meeting if that's what you like.
And also maybe start on looking at the regulations that we started with.
Right.
Yeah, we can get that on the agenda too.
Yep, let's do that. Okay?
Thank you.
But one thing, Dave did have somebody on Zoom who
Yep.
would like to
Yeah.
make a comment.
Okay.
Hi, this is Karen Mazel from 13 Perry Avenue, MACCA. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
I just wanted to point out really quickly, just to have some sort of frame of reference as to what other surrounding towns are doing. Glastonbury's been operating under a moratorium since September of 2021. It's an 18-month moratorium to give them plenty of time to shore up their regulations. And from what it sounds like, it's not real clear what the existing regulations are and that there's no agreement on what everybody on the board wants it to look like. So I'm just pointing that out, they're operating under giving themselves plenty of time to really do some thoughtful process to what they want their regulations to look like in the end. So that, it functions in the best interest of everybody. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else from the public like to speak? Yes, please. Come up to the podium and introduce yourself.
Hello, Andrew Simino from 78 Marlboro Street. Good evening, Commission. I'd like to thank you, and I appreciate all the time that you put into our approval and working with us in the past. And I just want to say I am a little concerned. I know you mentioned you're not. Our approval was under I just like you to consider this. Our approval was under the 1 per 25,000 cap. Our business model was based on that. Things are taking a lot longer with this state than we expected. So, we did expect to, when we get this thing off the ground, to not have such a challenge with the competition, and be able to provide back to the town what we promised them and back to the community what we promised them, which was the return on the investment, being part of the community, being able to give back, being able to restore the house, the Robert Stancliffe house. This is all very important, but it's very expensive. I just want to point out that we could do this a lot more inexpensive in another spot, in another town, so forth and so on. My heart is in this spot, and I just want you to consider that we did get this approval with that cap, thinking that was somewhat of a form of protection for our business and allowing us to be able to keep those promises. It's very important to me to remain accountable for everything that I sign up for. So I wouldn't be doing that if I wasn't standing in front of you explaining this. And I'd like to point out, for instance, on a more conservative roles that were taken by towns, Old Saybrook actually created a prohibition on any new cannabis establishments. They only allowed the 2 approvals that they already had. And Cromwell is actually sticking with the 1 per 25,000 cap as well. So I just want to explain that by removing the cap, so originally the cap was 1 per 25,000 till 2024, and there was a specific date. And then at that time, the regulation would be reconsidered, and it could have been removed or it could have been changed. So what they did by removing the cap was not saying, hey, unlimited retailers go into these towns. It was giving the power to the town to be able to make a choice. So meaning that just like Old Saybrook or Cromwell has made a choice to be more conservative, I would suggest that as well. And even I do appreciate the moratorium, and I do see the respect you guys are paying and the time you're putting into it. But I would appreciate us considering a even more conservative approach. So that's all I have to say.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
Anyone else from the public like to speak regarding this application? Okay, anybody else on Zoom? Okay, then we will continue this public hearing until our next meeting, so to allow time for some research.
Okay.
Everyone okay with that? Okay,
Well, except when's our next meeting?
Yeah, could you just do a quick motion on that? I didn't write a motion.
oh, to,
Yeah, we'll just do a verbal motion
to,
to continue the public hearing to the August 18th meeting.
okay. So a motion to continue the public hearing for application 21-18 until August 18th, 2022.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, motion is approved then. All right, next item of business is a public hearing for application 22-01, Main Street, Marlboro Street, and west side of Perry Avenue. Request for special permit modification, application of BRT DeMarco PTP LLC. May I have a motion to open the public hearing for this application, please?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, public hearing for application 22-01 is now open. Would someone like to speak on behalf of this application? Let's see. Yeah, podium over here, please.
Yeah, to this gentleman.
Oh.
right here. I think you're gonna have to talk to them.
This is the other one. And you can send this down to Dan, that's all done.
Okay. Okay, if you would just pass that down to Dan.
Perfect. Yeah, perfect.
I think they're both all done. Yep.
Oh, these are perfect. Cool.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Steve Sullivan from CCA Engineers, professional engineer licensed in the state of Connecticut. We are here before you for a special permit modification to Brainerd Place. The biggest change is related to buildings H, which is the Hart Jarvis, and buildings D. The previous plan had Hart Jarvis in the lower left-hand corner of that the presentation plan we're showing. That was going to be a museum for the Hart Jarvis. And the developer, after they started working on the property and exposed what Hart Jarvis looked like, they came up with the idea of trying to incorporate Hart Jarvis in its current location. Also, in discussions with Starbucks, we came up with a change to the building D, which is the Starbucks building and a small retail portion of the building. Essentially, we rotated that building 90 degrees, so the short side is perpendicular to Marlboro Street, and it's right behind the Hart Jarvis house. So building D will still be the Starbucks and a small retail. We submitted a July 7th letter which outlined the changes to this plan. There were some nominal de minimis changes to dimensions regarding buildings E and F, but the bulk of the change is really building H and building D. Building A did shift to the left 7 feet. So in building H, we did some parking calculations. And we figured the second floor we can get some office. And actually on the first floor, our parking calculations for restaurant. Very recently, the architects and the developer have decided to change that first floor use of Hart Jarvis. They want to use it as office now. So essentially what that means is the required parking goes down by 40 spaces. So we're going down from 1041 to 990, 990 spaces. So we will submit revised plans with that change to the parking. It changes the waiver to the parking count by a couple percentage points.
Can you repeat those numbers again, please?
Sure. So required parking with the restaurant, was 1,030 parking spaces. So changing it to office would reduce it down to 990 parking spaces. So that equates the parking waiver, the reduction from 25.9% to 22.9% by that change. Also, since it's been a few years since we've been here, but the Sage House, which is Building C, the other historic structure, they were able to salvage, or will be able to salvage, the second floor and for office. So that was added to the commercial space for the overall project. So second floor Sage House would be used as office. And that first floor was always planned for a restaurant, and that has not changed. Also in our package, we did submit a letter for the parking waiver, which again I will revise based on the change to office in the first floor Hart Jarvis. And also the other change is the phasing. We've broken up into 3 phases. Phase 1 is Building E, which is a large building on the front of the property, and the pharmacy building, Building B, Building C, Sage House, Building D, the coffee shop, and Building H. That is going to be done during Phase 1. I believe there was a comment from the town engineer, Jeffrey Jacobson. I think there was some confusion, but that was planned for Phase 1, Building H. And then obviously the Brainerd house would be also part of Phase 1. And Phase 2 would be Building F, which is a mixed-use building on the back corner of the property. And then Phase 3 is Building A, which is another mixed-use building of commercial and office and residential. Tonight we have...
I'm sorry, Steve, did you say Building H was part of Phase 1?
Yes, it is. Yes.
So-
If you look on sheet C12, which is the zoning compliance sheet.
Yeah, so I think the confusion is on C11.
Yes.
It's got the Phase 2.
Yeah, that was a typo. It's supposed to be Phase 1.
Okay.
But if you look at this part right here, Phase 1 has Building H in it.
Okay, all right, yeah, so yeah, I was,
That's
okay,
where- yeah.
okay. I had the same impression.
But overall, we felt the Jacobson memorandum was positive, and didn't have any issues with it. We just wanted to clarify that Building H is Phase 1. I did speak with the fire marshal about fire hydrants today. Essentially what he wants is, as they go through the individual building permits, he wants the opportunity to meet in the field and adjust hydrant locations if necessary. So we would obviously oblige in that request with the fire marshal. Tonight, we have a few folks with us. We have Alan Munketrick, who's going to talk about the architecture of Building H. We also have a memorandum, summary memorandum from VHB, the traffic engineer, to talk about the traffic counts associated with the additional square footage in Building H and Building C as far as the office space. And also the applicant, Dan Bertram, is here to talk about the project and the goals. And I think with that, I could turn it over to Alan to talk about the Building H restoration.
Good evening. My name is Alan Munketrick. My firm is Munketrick Associates. We're architects based here in Portland. Been working on this project for a long time. It's been exciting to see it finally getting to the point where there's shovels in the ground. In fact, I've been involved with this project, as many of you have, since 2007. The developer has tasked me with looking at the historic properties, Sage House, Brainerd House, and the Hart Jarvis House. Tonight, if I can, I'd like to just very quickly tell you where we are on the Brainerd House, because we have made some changes on the to the schematics for the Brainerd House. Relatively minor, but I think pretty exciting. If you could advance that one, please. Thank you. So, what's been happening over there so far is the removal of some of the later accretions to the interior of the building. And this has exposed some really interesting things about the building that we couldn't see before, primarily in terms of the proposed architectural changes. What we're looking at doing is instead of dividing up the large room on the right side of the first floor plan that you see here into two spaces, we've discovered that was originally built out as it's kind of a grand ballroom space, and it's a beautiful space. So what we're going to do is we're going to repurpose that space as a community room. The leasing office is now no longer part of this program, which frees up some other space as well. And then the other changes are relatively minor. I don't want to dwell on them, but I'm happy to answer any questions about the interior spaces. But just to summarize, if you could advance one more to the second floor, please. The program is basically the same on the second floor. Fitness rooms, a library, yoga room, activity rooms like this. And again, just to mention, if you it's been a couple of years since we looked at these. This is going to be an amenity center for the residential community here on site. So if we could go to the next slide, please. This is just a detail of the Hart Jarvis house, Building H, that Steve took you through. Apologize, it's reversed. So Marlboro Street is across the bottom. Building the Starbucks Cafe building is the long building, and then behind that is the present site of the Hart Jarvis house. So what we're proposing to do in order to make this all work, the engineers are proposing to, with the reorientation of the Starbucks building, is to bring in the drive along the what would be really the south side of the Hart Jarvis house in such a way that really requires us to eliminate what I call the northeast wing of the house. So that's the wing of the house you see if you're driving by on Marlboro Street that projects out towards Marlboro Street. It's rather flattened addition. We're sacrificing that. We know it's not an original piece of the house. We're doing the same at the Sage House. We're taking off much later additions. That addition, while it was a fairly early addition, was a service addition to the house. ceilings in there are 6'6" on the first floor and 6'6" and 5 feet on the second floor. So it doesn't meet code, which is 7'6" for egress. And to develop it at commercial space is just impossible. So we're sacrificing that, that section of the wing and exposing the original house in a way that I think is going to be quite nice. You could go to the next slide, please. I don't want to dwell on the basement. Maybe we'll go ahead one more to the main floor. So the developer has tasked us with looking at a layout for the Hart Jarvis house that would accommodate professional offices. That could be legal offices, could be an insurance company, a real estate company, something along those lines. The building works out quite nicely in the sense that we can adapt it for the new use in such a way that we can create Class A office space, but we're also restoring the original layout of the building, which currently is now chopped up with a lot of later partitions that the doctors put in when this building served their needs, which was completely different. So we're taking away all of those later accretions and restoring the spaces. You can see on the main floor, they're really basically 4 rather large spaces that really will lend themselves quite nicely to a professional firm where you might have need for a conference room, a reception space, workstations, and whatnot. So we felt that this was a much less intense use for the Hart Jarvis house than a restaurant. We would be hard pressed to get a restaurant in here without some major alterations to the building. So I'm personally quite pleased with the way this new use fits with the old. You can see across the bottom of the plan a modest addition to the house where we're removing the old wing that I mentioned earlier. We need to put back a small service addition to the house, about 8 feet, 20 by 24 feet, along those lines. That would accommodate handicap access into the house with a vertical lift, handicap bathrooms, a new entrance to the house from this side, which is closer to the Starbucks building and also to the parking. You may have seen from the site plan the house will appear when completed up on a little bit of a podium because of the way the land is going to be graded down around it. That's fine. We're creating, as I said, access to the back into the building through the back of the house, so that we don't have to look at ramping up to the porticos on the west side of the house. So the historic and architectural character of Hart Jarvis in this location can be maintained. I guess that's the point I really wanted to make tonight. Could you go one more? Thank you. And on the second floor, again, the bedroom spaces, once we clear out all of the later non-historic fabric, lends itself very nice to, I imagine it could be, you know, partners and associates offices, a small kitchenette, break room, that kind of thing. Really, the glove fits very nicely for professional offices for the Hart Jarvis house. And if it's developed to the Class A standards that we envision it will be, I'm confident that it will be a real asset for the town. I also want to say that in its original position is really a huge deal for the town because it's part of that Marlboro Street Historic District. And when we were looking at moving it out to the corner of the site facing Main Street, we were taking it out of that historic district. So now it's within the historic district. You've got the Sage House, the Hart Jarvis House, and the Brainerd House now in their, existing original configuration and relationship to one another. So I think that's all a great plus. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Charlie Baker with VHB. I'm a traffic engineer and a licensed professional engineer in the state of Connecticut. We prepared the original traffic impact study for the previous development proposal. And for this current revision, we just updated the trip generation forecast using the same methodology as that previous study to find out the impact that this current proposal would have on trips. And we found that the current revision would only result in an increase of less than 40 trips per hour during the peak traffic period. So for context, that's less than 1 new vehicle per minute. And that nominal change in traffic will not affect any of the conclusions from the original traffic impact study that was approved by the Office of State Traffic Administration, and it will not have any noticeable impact on surrounding traffic conditions. So be short and sweet. I'll be available for if there are any questions.
Good evening.
I'm Bertram, the developer. And I think that we'll call the beginning of that conversation the what, and I'll kind of try to touch on the why, right? And maybe a little bit of the how, right? So obviously our objective is to build a successful project. And we have begun, and phase 1 is underway by any measure. The exercise on our side has been to maximize the chances of success for the entire project. And so what I wanted to do, and it's a little long, so please bear with me for a minute, but we had asked the commercial leasing resource that we had brought on, which is CB Richard Ellis, to weigh in on our idea of trying to build building F in phase 2 by itself with this Hart Jarvis restoration in place. So I'll give you a discussion that went on between some of our internal leasing folks and CBRE. Hello, Paul. As a follow-up to our conversation, we would like to communicate how important it is to build Building F alongside Building E in order to get the retail leasing off the ground. We feel that if Building F also is constructed, it will really help with both our marketing and leasing efforts. We're finding that the brokerage community really needs to see buildings under construction, not just concept plans, in order for their clients to really consider, tour, and ultimately lease them. As an example, Town Center West in Rocky Hill has tried for many years to pre-lease the second phase of commercial retail with second floor office and has been unsuccessful. They are already very nice apartments and retail with the Starbucks in place. However, with no new physical building to show, phase 2, there have been no new tenants. See below aerial site, and I will relay this to the commission. It's right off of I-91 at exit 23 in Rocky Hill. Also mentioned, Avon's new Avon Village Center across from Whole Foods is still having issues finding new tenants, pricing them out with very high retail rental rates, low TI packages, and high triple nets. So while we need to have these buildings constructed, we'll also need to work with new tenants coming in to be successful with incentives and good TI packages. TI stands for tenant improvements. We've been out at the Brainerd Place site numerous times with brokers recently, and it's always the same question / feedback. When will the buildings go up? What is the timeline for the commercial in Building F, and when will the remaining retail office start? How can someone commit to something that doesn't look like it's going up anytime soon? All fair questions, and we feel that sometimes we're dancing around the answers. While we think it would be great to start phase 1 of the project with Building E to show some life, to get the site, apartments, and Starbucks up and running, we also think in order to get the commercial piece started, space has to be constructed, and the 10,000 square feet in Building F would be a great place because we would have various size configurations and not an unmanageable amount to start off with, and there would be a real time frame for occupancy. Sending brochures and emails and taking brokers and their prospective tenants to the property to look at historic buildings that need a lot of remodeling and a site that needs quite a bit of work just isn't getting it done. We're having a very difficult time pre-leasing or attracting any new occupiers to Brainerd Place without construction activity or retail suites and shell conditions to show. There's a market in these types of areas that are growing with limited services and rental housing like Portland. Brainerd Place, being right in the center of Portland with great visibility, should be able to attract local regional banks which have expressed some interest, restaurants. I'm skipping because we don't want to talk about something that's not ready to be talked about. Local retailers and boutiques, personal services to complement the apartments, hair, nails, spas, especially with Starbucks coming in, some other nationals who also understand the benefit of smaller demographic with limited retail nearby will really look at this location as well as medical and office users. Please drive it home to the team that it's imperative that in order for this project to be successful, to attract new commercial tenants, Building F needs to be built early in the project. Thank you for your consideration, Jen and Alexis. So, I usually get up here, and I've been coming here for years, and I almost never read anybody else's words. I'm usually just kind of saying the world according to me, but I thought that was a very good briefing from the people who are charged with filling the commercial space. And so if we go through for a minute, I'll go back to kind of my presentation, and we think about what we have to offer right now in phase one. We have Building D, which we've just rotated, and the Starbucks square footage has grown up to 2,400 square feet, leaving about 1,400 square feet of remaining square footage there. Then we have the Sage House, which is a historic building being remodeled, and we do think a restaurant is the appropriate first floor use. And then you have the pad site for the pharmacy out in the, along Main and Marlboro. That's what phase one contemplates being offered to the market in the approved master plan. Hart Jarvis was slated to be kind of allowed to move to the southwest corner, fit up in more of a, by a nonprofit for a use to be determined. That does not leave larger spaces, and I think they covered it pretty well in their email, that 10,000 square feet as part of Building F, as something that we could deliver on a knowable timeline. And that would be Class A, perfect new shell type of space. And so I get the attraction for that. And so we also understand that it's a balancing act of a lot of different considerations that gave us the original development plan in the first place. And that had to do with historic restoration, it had to do with specimen trees, it had to do with commercial development, and it had to do with vibrancy in the town center, among other things. But I think that from our perspective, we see with the very significant amount of infrastructure investment that has to occur to have even one business or resident move into this facility, is just a significant kickoff. And we're doing it. We're not up here saying we're thinking about phase one. We're going with phase one. What we're trying to do is give you the feedback we're getting from the marketplace, looking at the master plan and saying the commission has some discretion to allow this to happen in another order, and that's the root of our proposal, which is to break this into a three-phase job and do more with certainty faster. And we think that by doing that, we greatly improve our odds of being successful leasing the A building, because we have so much then being developed. And I did feel that for me to come up and ask to build Building F by itself was insufficient. So I do think that by saying, well, we had another problem anyway, there is not an actionable scenario for our Jarvis as we stand here today. And so we were trying to come up with, well, what's a good trade-off? So by doing Building F, we're saying, okay, we can commit to this, and in structuring the financing and all that it takes to build Building F now, we could incorporate these improvements for our Jarvis house. because that was always something that we were allocating a space for it to be moved to and fit up by others, and that doesn't look like it's ever going to happen. So to keep the Hart Jarvis house where it is, looking at this a little differently, we think this is a creative proposal, and we hope you like it, because we're just trying to keep the ball rolling, because it's getting started. The tree guys were out there today getting started on, I think, over on the E part of the site. That'll become obvious in a couple of days here, but you know, we want to keep the ball rolling. So with that, I think that's our presentation, but we're all here to answer any questions, and we do have, we would request that we leave the hearing open this evening, because we would like to submit the work on Steve Sullivan's side that reflects Alan's analysis of the, because Alan had some very good ideas to improve around the Hart Jarvis house, reducing the ramps, some things that actually, I think, detract from the presentation of the front of Hart Jarvis, which I think with his improvements would be very nice. So that concludes our presentation. I can hang here for questions, or you tell me.
Anyone have, that was a lot. Anyone have
No.
questions
Yeah,
for
sorry.
Dan?
Excuse that.
Well, I have a question about the Hart Jarvis house. What is the issue with, why was the decision made to leave it in its place?
Because the amount of money to just move it to another location was extraordinary all by itself before you even started being able to fit it up. There wasn't a traction that I could see from any groups to do something where they could fund improving Hart Jarvis. So we looked at it and said, how can we accommodate the fact that when we got to town, there were 6 things on the historic registry, and we did pare it down, and I said, hey, listen, I mean, from day one, this place is called Brainerd Place now because I always thought the Brainerd house was a jewel, right? And so that was the start. I got kind of forced into Sage, right? Like in that initial review process and approval process. And there's just not a solution that we see for Hart Jarvis that is actionable. So I don't think the money's there to move it. I don't think the money's there to improve it. And so we had to look at it again more fundamentally and say, how do we solve this problem? And that this trade-off with F and restoring it in place, I think there's enough de-risking on the job for us to justify investing in Hart Jarvis, whereas we hadn't agreed to make that investment before. But once you start, you want to make sure you succeed in the mission, and I think this is a key way to do that, and I think a good value to the community.
I guess I would ask if there's any more information that could be provided on as to the reasoning for the change to the phasing. You know,
Sure.
a little more data, a little more.
Sure. Some of it's an economic pressuring, right? In that the improvements for all the offsite, the storm drainage, the traffic, the signalization, the sewer, the water, you name it. There's so much infrastructure that goes into the entire project that has to be done for anything to start operating, right? So there's this inherent pressure to do as much of the development as you can, as quickly as you can. We're basically coupling that kind of analysis that I think anyone who is, I think it's articulated a little bit, not directly, I'll try to make it a little more direct, in the community of people who would lease the later phase spaces. So they're doing the math and saying, well, will I commit my business to being at that location if they might be off by a year on their estimate on when that that parcel may exist, right? Or that, excuse me, that space may physically exist. And so we're saying that by getting this expedited into this next phase with the 10,000 square feet that come with it, and that's in the regs, there's that commercial square footage is actually an enabling mechanism for the building height. And so you need that amount of square footage in that building for the 4 stories of residences. So I guess the long and the short of it is we're trying to make a compelling case to the outside world, and there's nothing more compelling than a beautiful living, breathing site with shell space. That's the easiest thing to lease, right? Where somebody can come up and look at it and, okay, I'll take this, I can visualize it. They don't have to imagine anything. And so we're trying to create that easy of a process for our commercial brokers because, frankly, in the last 10 plus years, the commercial landscape has changed fundamentally. And so we have to spoon feed some things. So this is our best idea there. And Hart Jarvis, while it's not really accretive. So much more money will have to go into making it look nice and restoring it to a certain standard that will so far exceed any rent we will get from an office use within it. But it'll be, you know, I'm saying it. It'll be another gem inside the site. It wasn't my idea. It was my partner's idea to say, well, maybe we could leave it, right? And when you think about driving in the main drag here, you come down and around, and you take a right, and you start to look up, and you're going to get a look at the columns on the front of the Hart Jarvis house, and I think it will present very nicely. I always struggled with how to do something on this site where 2 buildings face Marlboro and one faces the river, right? And so this plan accommodates that. It was in part enabled. I mean, it's the funniest thing sometimes what makes things get tweaked, but when we save this beech tree right here, right? Each one of these things ripples into another thing, and then you kind of just have this very elaborate puzzle by the end of the whole process. So I don't know if I touched on it enough, but those are some of the factors.
So Tom, you're asking for like some sort of a document that
Well, I
kind of
just
explains so
think,
we can,
you know, it would be helpful to have
yeah.
Well, I certainly
a
will,
basis for what we're trying to do here, or what they're trying to do.
Sure. And I think that the M2 language in the regs for good cause and following a public hearing, the developer may secure relief from the requirement necessitated balancing between residential and commercial, provided that the commission is satisfied that conditions beyond the control of the developer will prevent the execution of the schedule of development as approved. So we're basically saying that we think it's an insurmountable hill to lease enough of the A building before we can even start to offer these 10,000 square feet that come in the F building. We want to have the table as well set as we can to take on that A building, right? And this certainly helps. So there's no changes to the master plan tonight other than the addition of the top floor of Sage, right, where we got in there. It had been written off years ago. If you went into that building, they had decided that upstairs was worthless, and they had put all of the HVAC equipment, the actual, it was like a kind of an octopus. It was the air handlers and the supplies and stuff just across the floor to service the lower level. And so it was written off as not usable space. We got up there, the bones are still good, and so it is usable space. So we're adding square footage there, and then we are adding the Hart Jarvis house in the way that Alan described. We're not taking away anything from the master plan. We're just trying to deliver it in a way where we say, as the primary decision makers in the investment, we can build this building, we can build the Starbucks building, we can fix up Sage, we can fix up Brainerd, we can fix up Art Jarvis, we can build F, all without getting anybody to come along and say, I'll lease that space. We can get all of that done without another decision maker. And that's what we're asking for permission to do. And we think by doing that, then we'll be able to articulate a development schedule that will be attractive for retailers, service providers, you name it, to become part of it. And then we'll build more.
So what's the timeline for that? Because by putting off building A till phase 3, that's where 60%
That
or
is the
more of
bulk
the
of, that is the
commercial.
bulk of the commercial. There's no question about that. And so we're not putting it off.
Well,
We-
I'm wondering,
Oh,
so
sure,
what's
sure,
the
please.
timeline? I know
So-
you're
yeah, so
talking
let me-
about 3 phases, but
Sure, so let-
what are the timelines
Yep.
associated with that?
I can answer that. So this building right here will take 18 months to build. And it has, that clock is basically starting today when they start, clearing the site itself, right? So the tree guys are the first phase of that. So we're turning the corner from just building demolition to construction. So that process, 18 months out for the delivery of building E. This building F will be 6 months behind that. So we can have, if given the permission to, have E and F built in 2 years from now, okay? The rest of this happens during that time period, right? Because we've already been demoing, we're inside the Brainerd house already, and that's what revealed some of the changes that Alan made today. So the other things in the center of the site can be executed on in that same timeline. That's not to say that we're going to do nothing for 2 years and then hope on A. We will be using the fact that we can commit to that schedule that I just gave you to the outside world and say, if you'd like to be a large user of space in A, and we get a couple of those deals together, the bank and the financing side of things requires some level of pre-leasing to build a building that big, right, of commercial. So we're just trying to make an effective pitch for that. So it can be started in that 2-year period. A can be started. It doesn't have to be 1, 2, 3, because frankly, we won't be done here when we want to start here. And that is in part defined by the absorption rates of apartments. There are 99 units in this, and so we can lease up 99 units in 6 months. So when we start doing this and roll it out, we want 6 months later for that leasing program to continue into the first, release space of the next building. So that's kind of how you stack it up so that you have continuous processes. You don't have gaps in the delivery schedule if you can avoid it. I'd love to be done with the whole job in 3.5 years. I'm just trying to figure out how to do that and make the case to others to come join us, right? So.
Well, I just recall going through the whole mixed use thing, and it just doesn't seem like it's a mixed use anymore.
Chantel, I've replayed every comment I think you've made over the years in my head because I remember. And I'm just here basically saying this is my best idea to do as much as possible, as quickly as possible. So I didn't mean to cut you off at all. I apologize if I did. But I do, I recall, and I know.
I mean, you just want, what kind of, I know you can't give 100% guarantee, but it's just like, okay, we're focusing on the residential and maybe a couple of, commercial areas. It's just, is the true picture of the mixed use is that gonna fall by the wayside?
I think what we're having right now, number one, I sure hope not, because this isn't much of a winner if all that gets built is what we can green light right now. We kind of need the whole thing to come online and stabilize to make up for the infrastructure investment that was done for the whole site. We wouldn't do the infrastructure we have to do just for these apartments over here and the Starbucks. That would never pencil out. So I guess the short answer is that we think we will be effective with the commercial by doing this other stuff first. And I guess, actually I should say this. This is a little bit of an unusual job in that we have very hard-fought commercial space in the form of these historic restorations. We got 3 of them, right? And so that's a lot of money and a lot of effort that is kind of doing it the hard way. And that's going on now in these initial phases. And when we have a Starbucks, which is in a new building, but we don't have much other space, you know, that's good, right? And we like that. But that's kind of why we're trying to get that 10,000 square foot section, because we feel like if we could get, if somebody wanted a big chunk of that, and we can get a couple people talking to us, and then that's a start on A, right? If we can get a little bit of buzz going on this place. And we will, I will say this, we wouldn't have started phase 1 at all if we didn't think we were gonna get buzz from just doing that, right? I mean, we tend to be successful on this. We just would like to have it not take 10 years, right? And so when we see a way to be creative, because I think I've been at a few of these meetings over the years, across, not necessarily at the P&Z, but town meetings, be it the EDC or the selectmen, where I've said, well, I'm getting close to having to really focus on the Hart Jarvis house because it's kind of like in the way, right, of phase 1. And so when we got down to that hard focus, this is what we came up with. And like I said, it was my partner's idea, and then I was surprised how I actually thought it solved a lot of issues. So then we spent a long time running the exercise of how we could afford to put that much more money into an historic building, and this was the earlier start on F was the answer to that. But even again, it was a little bit of a random walk to it, but there's a creative solution, so I do think it's worth a try, and therefore we're here and make a proposal.
And the market for the apartments, I mean, things have changed in the past 4 years. A lot of apartments have been built in the last 4 years.
Sure.
There are new complexes that have been opening to the north and to the south. And how do you feel about that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, because I think nationally we're undersupplied on multifamily housing by any historic trends. And so we found that in this kind of COVID, post-COVID thing that we're getting into now, where folks have come more into Connecticut, I mean, because we had a population reduction going on for years that has stopped and turned a little bit. Now how long it's a sustained turn, we'll see. But we see that there is not sufficient supply throughout the state to meet what demand, what any shift, because there's always, I should say it this way, there's always demand for the pretty little thing, the new shiny button, right? People like to move into the new complex because there's always something that's kind of quietly going offline, right? So there's always some demand for new product, but it really hasn't been, that demand hasn't been met. There haven't been, we look at where Portland sits to service the 91 corridor going up to Hartford, down to New Haven, this is a very nice community for people to live in, to work in those areas. Obviously, to the extent we can have them work on site, that'd be great too, but I guess the short version is, if you'd asked me at the start of this job, I had more uncertainty about the rental market on the residential side than I do now. So that part has improved. Unfortunately, the commercial has weakened in almost a similar way. So that's one strength and that one's weakened, but it doesn't change what the desire for everybody is, because a mixed-use community is a nice place to live in, you know, and Starbucks is a great first tenant. I'm very happy that they're steadfast with us, actually. Even when we couldn't give them a start time, they said, we've done an analysis of the area and we want to be on your site. And so they've basically just said they'd wait till we got started. Now, they've been given dates and we gotta perform to that now, but.
It's almost like the chicken and egg thing too, because you have the people, I mean, to move into a mixed-use development, you would want to have all those things there that are going to be available. So it's, I don't know. I mean, I think that's why the plan is to develop it, you know, concurrently.
I agree with that. I agree with that. The chicken and egg thing, I think, is a great way to put it, because we have. Is the residential the chicken or the egg, right? And so in commercial, you know, you alternate that. And so we have a building we're opening in Danbury right now, 30 floors, 30 units per floor. It's a micro version of this in that folks went by and they saw it and they said, well, geez, you know, I want to live in that building. We didn't have any signs up. They were finding out who was developing it and knocking down the door to just get in line. And without having seen it, any of the units inside, we had these top 2 floors fully leased without even a showing. And so there is demand for things well executed, I suppose. Yes, to your point, it's on the promise of other parts of the site that are being, you know, a gym will open and there's a pool and there are these amenities that will flank it. But we have kind of a housing crisis, in my view. There's probably a longer conversation that can be had in this kind of a setting to talk about how, why I believe the apartment demand is sustainable. But I will say that from where you guys sit, it doesn't matter. You only need the investment to be made to create the beautiful thing. Whether or not we make any money is our problem, because you're not going to have complete apartments that you leave empty. You're going to move rents to meet the market. The product will have already been created. In this case, if we build the 2 buildings at the same time, we made all the decisions. We're married to the finishes before we even are done. When you break it into phases, that's sometimes where you have the problem, because the second phase is like, oh, we missed the market in our first specification and they downgraded or something. I'm not fear-mongering, I'm just kind of running out the processes. My feeling is that in this context, with this unit mix, there are a few things that we bring to the table that we think are insightful in markets. I would argue that a lot of the stuff that you're talking about would be mixed towards larger units, and these are studios and 1-bedrooms. They're targeted to younger people and older people, and they're only 30% are 2 bedrooms. So there's a unit mixing component to why we feel the demand will be high.
But you're still looking for pretty decent rents, and this isn't.
There's no question.
This isn't.
There's no question it will be. Yeah, and that is just a function of construction costs. You can't build something new without actually having a decent rent on the backside, but there aren't a lot of direct competitors. We've certainly surveyed the market and feel confident about that. But to your point, chicken and egg point, when they see other developments that we've done that we are now building here on the residential side, and retailers are then seeing, okay, well, there's some demographic filling these apartments, right, at rents that you're talking about. That's helpful to making the case about what retailer might come in and what automatic demand there already is from the people who are not even having to get in their car to come to that location. So You're looking for any edge you can, right, to make the case. But we definitely, I'll tell you this is an actionable way. We can't say, oh, let's make building A phase 1 and we'll just see what happens. We'll build a giant building and we'll all just be looking at that for a while. You kind of have to, what I like about this plan is there are lots of little things to get wins on, little bat on the ball opportunities, right? Because Sage isn't a crazy thing to lease when if you just think about it as a restaurant on the first level or an office on the top. The second part of the is not real hard to get somebody into 1,400 square feet next to Starbucks. Each one of these things we can do. It's when it gets to be bigger scale where you need to have a bigger show going on around it to attract those folks. Does that make sense?
Well, I guess I'm thinking back to the last, the September approval where you took things out of the first, you took that first floor commercial out, and then
No, and I will say this. We've spent well over $1 million just knocking buildings down since then because we had a path forward. So I was coming out to say, we'll get this thing started, and we have. And we're continuing. We just want to continue with more gusto because we do think that the commercial lease-up is a challenging environment, so let's do everything within our control, even if that means doing more faster. I think it's a calculated risk, but we're able to absorb any outcome on the on our plan that we're talking about here. So.
Other questions for Dan before we let him go?
I have one
Sure.
question. So I know you're asking for a waiver on the parking, well, the numbers to be a little different. I'm just wondering, a lot more people are working at home more days, so I thought I saw in the explanation that I just want to be sure that you took that into consideration because you were talking about how there would be parking available because
the
people.
overlap, right, sure.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that you have that consideration for sure, right? And I have as a counterpoint in the 5-10 year horizon, I'm a big believer in transportation as a service, just as you get more and more of let's just imagine Uber with self-driving, where that will reduce the on-site parking requirement if you can get around in an automatic and convenient way without a 15-minute pause before anybody shows up. My feeling is that with the parking ratios we have here, where we're at 1 per studio, 1.5 spaces, parking spaces for a 1-bedroom and 2 for every 2, is sufficient for this environment. The building I referenced a minute ago was in a more downtown type of environment, but not a city by any stretch. And the difference there was it was 1 per studio, 1.5 per 1, but only 1.5 per 2-bedroom even, right? And so we're kind of systematically having less parking on site on these types of developments, but that's very consciously being done. And so we think that we'll be fine with that. And I will tell you, there is a relief valve. I don't want to add expense to this, but I do want to show that we have thought about this. The way that the grades work on building A, if we had a wonderful prospective tenant that said, I'll take 40,000 square feet, right? And we just need some more parking, the entire bottom of building A could be accessed on that lower level in that corner, and it would be structured parking a lot like what is under these 2 buildings, because there's 125 parking spaces under this footprint and under that footprint that is expensive to provide, but boy does it give opportunities for all of the other outside park features, right? Because you don't just have wall-to-wall surface parking. And so we can provide more parking within the footprint of this plant if we had to invest in it to make A viable, and we'll just cross that bridge when we come to it. But I wanted you to know that we've run out contingencies all over the place.
Sure. Other questions for Dan? No? Good. Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
So we'll be back in a couple of weeks. So thank you for your time.
Other comments from members of the public? Okay, seeing none in the room. Anyone on Zoom? Oh, I'm sorry. We do have someone in the room.
When you're done.
Hello, Dan. My name's Owen Guile. I consider myself an investor in this project. Invested even before Dan was involved, with a little bit of a different perspective. And I'm thrilled, and I mean thrilled, to witness Alan Munketrick's presentation of sensitive treatment to the 3 historic properties, which are the hinge pin of this entire mixed-use development. The history is clear, and I have been a supporter from day one, shoulder and shoulder with Dan Bertram, in ensuring that we got a mixed-use development zoning change to allow this to take place. And it wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick. And further, to ensure that this had every opportunity, I supported Dan as then chairman of the Economic Development Commission for Portland, to ensure that tax abatement was appropriately administered. And I understand where we are tonight, as clearly, I think, as anybody in the room. And it's good news and bad news in some ways. The good news is what I just spoke to, and that is to have the security of knowing that a person of Alan Munketrick's caliber is involved here is an amazing possibility. The fact that Park Jarvis is going to remain extant without any movement at all is also an incredibly important benefit. The application in front of you begins and ends with the pertinent considerations, I think, for you as commissioners. The first sentence says, in order to develop this property as quickly as possible, we're asking for the following, X, Y, and Z. And it ends by saying, we deserve this because circumstances are beyond our control. And Dan spoke to that, clearly. I disagree with that. I understand exactly what he said, and it has merit. I would just say, find another real estate firm to find your tenants. You've had one for a long time that didn't play well, and now Atlantic has come along, and I understood your verbatim advice that you received from them. I'll bet I could find 10 or 20 that would read you a different story. But that's what it's all about. It's the first sentence and the last sentence. But your job is overarching. It's not about the first and last sentence here. It's not about what you've heard or seen. It's what is it all about? How did it begin? What was its intent? And I do think that it would be important for you to give that real serious thought. Mixed-use development, as I mentioned, was a long, heavily considered argument. And ultimately, the value of maintaining the character of Portland in its historical context and the architectural significance of these three particular structures allowed you as a commission to make a decision to elevate the amount of residential housing that would be allowed far above what would have otherwise been allowed. That was the condition. And he stayed with it. Those buildings are there, and they're going to be dealt with. And while I'm saying that, I would ask you to look just at least at the introductory letter that you received, where it says, and I'm paraphrasing, but I'm going to deal with hard drivers in the same manner that I will with Sage. I get it, and I get it. It's shorthand, but if I were you, I would insist on some real clarity as to what is meant by that statement. Just to make sure that you are going to receive the product that was intended when it says Secretary of Interior standards and so forth will be maintained in the restorative process to make this adaptive reuse possible. And that's where Alan Munketrick is just incredibly important. But it shouldn't rest just with him. There are other people that could advise you as to whether or not this is being done up to that level of standards, and you could bring them in to assist and to assist you to make sure that that is in fact the way things are being handled. To my original point here, the concomitant development of the apartments and the commercial retail use, mixed use, concomitant, basically 50-50, you're going to chug along and get this done as we go. That's not what you see tonight. What we see tonight is, okay, phase one, that's the deal. After that, it's apartments, and then, finally, and I'm going to have to say maybe, what's the assurance? Maybe there will be further commercial retail development. If phase one and phase two are complete, maybe. And I'm speaking that way because the intent of the mixed-use development for Portland was focused on the first two and most important elements of the plan of conservation and development. Create a town center and do it by leveraging the development of the Elmcrest campus in a mixed-use development. Apartments are not the full measure of creating this town center in the best interest of that plan of conservation and development. It is to stimulate business activity. You have 240 apartments. Let's just round it off and say there are 500 persons living there, hopefully. But as it's now defined, it's almost a gated community. It doesn't have, I would say it has no real pedestrian access to the center of Portland. One might argue that, but you be the judge. Most people would have to drive off-site, away from the Brainerd Place development, to go to the post office, go to the town hall, or go across the street to the ale house to have a lunch. It's important, I think, and beneficial to Dan and the team to have the amenities available, the restaurants and the barber shop and the florist or whatever. There are all kinds of small businesses that could very well be supported by even a community as small as the 500, let alone what that would stimulate for other people in town to make use of, and to create more business opportunities and more employment. You get the message. Dan's a developer. So am I. Development is change. He's a change agent. I've been a change agent all my life. Mine has always been in the public's interest. How do we get a better quality of life? How do we get more civility? Please, take your time. Get whatever assistance, whatever help, whatever guidance you need to look at this. You're not looking at the original site plan. I have a copy over here if you want to look at it. The whole section on dwellings has changed, and appropriately. All the language that talked about moving hard drivers to the other is gone. Lots of other pieces have moved off the page. The concomitant development is gone. You spent a lot of time tonight talking about the cannabis question. That's a joke compared to this. It's an absolute joke. This. Is your job. This is the future of this town. Thank you.
I believe someone on Zoom had a question or would like to make a statement.
Yes, is Karen Mazza, 13 Perry Avenue. I live on the street that borders the Elmhurst property, and my main comments are regarding the section of the modification request that deals with parking. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes. Yes.
So I read the application. This development started with 1,030 parking spaces. At a previous meeting, they were approved a reduction of 235 spaces, and where they currently stand is 795 parking spaces. And he's asking for a further reduction a second time now. Because of, the change in plans and working around trees from what I read in the application. And then one of the women on the commission there said one of my points, which was that the argument for this reduction in parking spaces working in the development, and I quote from the application, says, many apartment spaces will be available for office use during the day, and the majority of residents will be at work during these hours. And her exact point is my exact point, and I just want to reiterate that we're in a different world now. There are so many more people that are working remotely that were not before. There are so many more super large businesses like Cigna and Aetna, the insurance companies, that are now doing office sharing and work from home structure. So you're going to have people working from home, and I don't think you can bank on, a share model of parking spaces when you're talking 230 apartments. He's also got it calculated 1.5 parking spaces per one bedroom. But if you're renting a one bedroom to a married couple, a young married couple, peeve. My concern about the reduction in parking is that it gets dicey over there with the 230 apartments, residents, to easily find parking once they move in for their cars because there's this sharing model of spaces with the office and everything. I said this at other meetings before, that people are like water and they will do whatever is easiest. And if it gets hard to find parking in that development, they're going to come down Perry Avenue and try and park here and walk into those apartment buildings because both of them border Perry Avenue. It's my understanding right now that the only barrier between those two apartment buildings and our street are plantings. There's a schematic of the plantings that are proposed for the site, and it has the current, like the planted space, and then it has a larger circle that shows the mature space that the mature bushes will take up. So they're going to be, and it's my reading that there'll be smaller plants that will grow to fill in the space. But if I lived in those apartment buildings and it was dicey parking over there, I would try to park here and walk through those little bushes because my door is right there to the apartment building. So my concern is that further reduction in the parking spaces was freeing up in the day. Can you guys still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My concern is that people are going to try to procure barrier to prevent that. I don't think no parking signs on our street is really going to work because that doesn't leave us as residents enough space if we have people or graduation parties to park. People that we need to park is still live, with our neighbors who need to park, and we also all park on the street because we have multiple cars. He said he's asking for a reduction in parking spaces, but when he stood up there a few minutes ago, he said that he has the ability to provide more parking spaces right now. It would cost money, but he can do it. So I don't think the right answer is to grant a further reduction in parking spaces, especially if he just admitted that he has a way to provide parking for these apartments. I'm just really concerned, and I think I would request that if he is allowed to further reduce parking spaces based on that rationale, the whole town, and I think you all, has done a very good job of having this development go up with consideration for those of us that have to live bordering it, and we're so appreciative of that. But if that parking reduction is granted, we'd like to request a border fence. It could just be a decorative metal fence with slats, but it's something that people can't get through. So people won't think that they can park here and walk into the development, because that's a real concern. It's 230 apartments bordering the street. You're going to reduce parking spaces, and we're just nervous that that's would happen. And I think that's all I got. So thank you for listening, and thank you for looking out for us.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else from the public like to make a statement? Sure.
Might I address a couple questions that came up?
Certainly.
So if I may start with the last comments that were made for 1 second. I might not have been clear in the presentation on what I felt was adequate parking for the residential, which is provided under the buildings and around them. We're not concerned about that being the relief valve or the insufficient parking. This is emergency only. There is on a plan Steve was showing me, there's actually a sign here talking about no parking for Brainerd Place residents. So my reference to additional parking was in the context of commercial. And so it's over in the other part of the site where I think that there's the potential exists. It's not on the residential product with the way that this is laid out, in our opinion. That I think is the thrust of what I'm going to say for the Perry Avenue resident. And please let us know if anything's going on with the construction crews that we need to know about. So I want to say that officially as well. And then last, I would say that I share one point with Ellen, which is I do believe in civility in this process. So I think that we've made a very sensitive to the town proposal, and one that is taking in all considerations from all stakeholders, of which Ellen is a significant one, as we've spent a lot of time on this over the years. So with that, we'll conclude our comments anyway.
Thank you. Other comments from members of the public, either here in the room or on Zoom? Yes, sir.
Again, Tom LeClaire, 9 Perry Avenue. I think he just brought up a very important word, stakeholders. Me and my wife made the decision to buy a stake in this town. We went through the process, and it was very difficult for us. I appreciate sitting here listening today. You guys have a whole lot of decisions involved with this immense project, not relating to the residents of Perry Avenue, but I very much appreciate your cooperation, your understanding that there are still people living on this dead-end road. We bought into a dead-end road. That's what we were presented with when we purchased the house. So we are here to do our due diligence to achieve the best possible outcome for us, as well as the people putting money into this development for our town. So thank you guys for your considerations.
Thank you. Anyone else? Here in the room or on Zoom? Anybody? Last chance for tonight.
I have one item.
Sure.
We have the application for the special permit revision attached to the letter of July 7th, and on the second page it discusses the phasing. I guess I would request that we clarify what I heard during the meeting, which is that the Hart Jarvis will be part of phase 1 and not part of phase 2, because there's conflicting information between the letters and the drawing package. So we could get that clarified. And
We'll do that in between meetings.
Okay. Thank you. Anything further? Anything further by commission members? All right, so this meeting, the public hearing will be continued to our next meeting, which is August 18th. So, Tom, would you please read the motion?
Motion to continue public hearing for application number 22-01, Main Street, Marlboro Street, and west side of Perry Avenue, request for a special permit modification. Application and property of BRT DeMarco, PTP, LLC, Assessors Map 19, Lot 68, Zone B3, TCBD, to the August 18th, 2022 meeting.
May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the motion is approved, and the public hearing will continue on August 18th. Okay, we'll move on to our regular meeting then. So the first item of business is application 21-13, 264 Freestone Avenue, and we have received an email request to extend the discussion on this application to our next meeting. So do we have a motion for that?
We do.
All right, that one can go down to, oh, Chantal, you can do that one. All right, send it down to Rob.
Rob, you want to read a motion?
I can do it.
extension request and continue the application deliberations to the August 18th, 2022 meeting for application number 21-13, 264 Freestone Avenue. Request for site plan review for excavation work to construct a new 1,800 square foot building for contractor trade units. Application of property of Global Freestone LLC. Assessors map 20, lot 179, zone 1, industrial. Reasons, applicant requested extension to fully respond to town engineer's comments.
May I have a second, please?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the motion is approved. Next item of business is to receive in applications. I see none. Under, next item is the other category, and I see nothing on the agenda. Does anybody have anything to discuss under the other category? All right, we'll move to staff report, and I'll just run through these. Dan, if you have anything for us, tell me to stop. So, Town Center Village reviews?
Nothing.
Bond reductions?
Nothing.
Land use training?
Nothing. I am working on that. I wanted to get started on that last week, so I'm remiss. I wanted to give you a little bit of an update on that, but I'm going to work. Carrie Olson's out this week, so I will get started with that with her. John Giskowski, our consultant planner, I'd like him to do one, and then I might reach out on the affordable housing component as well.
And so this will be, to summarize, this will be 4 hours of training that we can do online?
Yeah, so we'll have a live online training, I guess is the best way to describe it. We'll set up a date and time. If you're available, great. If not, we'll simply have you watch the recording to meet the requirement for the 4 hours of training.
Okay, thank you. Next item is updates on Brainerd Place. I think we're good there.
Yeah, I guess I could remove that for next time.
Unless anybody has anything else, okay. Correspondence?
None.
Okay, next item is public comment. The commission will now hear any brief comments from any members of the public.
Nothing in the chat.
Okay, seeing none, then we'll move on to approval of minutes from July 14th. I will abstain because I was not present at that meeting.
I will abstain because I was not present at that meeting.
Okay, so do we have, we do have a quorum.
It's a very not
Wh-
well-attended meeting.
I heard it was a well-run meeting.
It was efficient. I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Okay, the minutes are approved. May I have a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, the meeting is adjourned.